Welcome to Geopod. This week we've got a hot button issue. It's gun violence. Let's go around the table and see who we've got for this discussion. I'm Andrew Patterson, teacher here.
I'm Bhargav, student.
I'm Sai, student.
I'm Bilal, president of the Coppell Geographic Society.
And I'm Nihar, the treasurer.
And so today we have a very delicate topic to discuss. It's the geography of gun violence. In the past couple of years, we've seen the amounts of school shooting and gun-related violence in America increase, and especially the media seems to like to cover those topics a lot more. And over 40,000 incidents of gun violence in America have occurred just in this year. And the year isn't even over yet. And this has resulted in over 10,000 deaths. America has 6 times as many firearm homicides as Canada and 15 times as many as Germany. So you can see, it seems like America is doing a lot worse in terms of gun violence than other countries. And this may be because America owns almost half of the civilian-owned guns in the world. Now, I know in terms of the people we have here, there are a lot of differing opinions in terms of the Second Amendment and in terms of, is gun violence, as bad as it is, or is the media just, trying to throw it at us and make it seem a lot worse than it is? So in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing correlations, trends that we might see, race, color, that contribute to gun violence, and then we're going to have a brief discussion on the Second Amendment and whether or not it is beneficial to the protection of American citizens or harmful. So why don't we start with the trends that we've seen in the United States in terms of state gun violence. So Nihar, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So according to a 2013 study that ranked the top 10 states with gun violence in the United States, they found that at number 10 came Tennessee. So in Tennessee, less than 25% of adults in the state had at least a bachelor's degree. So this could show a correlation between education and crime. At number 9, we have New Mexico, which is the highest death rate by legal intervention. This is death caused by police or law officials. So what they found was this may be attributed to the large population of Hispanics and blacks. Does this show that gun violence is associated with race or not? At number 8, we have Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, most states don't require a permit to buy a handgun, shotgun, or rifle. So this could show that not requiring permits on handguns and other weapons may increase the amount of gun violence found in the state. They also found that in Oklahoma, households were among the most poorest in the nation. This could also show that poverty is associated with gun violence.
So those are the first 3 states that have gun violence, and we're going to move on to number 7. The trends have shown that the gun violence is more concentrated in the East Coast. So we're coming up on Wyoming. Interestingly enough, Wyoming has the second highest suicide rate in the country. 87% of the firearm deaths are caused by suicide. So what you have to notice is that a lot of the firearm deaths that are recorded are based on suicide. Not all of them are going to be some guy or girl with a gun that goes and shoots people. Some are just suicide. Interestingly enough, though, Wyoming can be used as counter evidence to the education gun violence correlation that Nihar proposed for Tennessee, because Wyoming is actually an educated state. 94% of adults 25 years or older have at least a high school diploma, which is the highest rate in the country. So this could be used as counter evidence to maybe the trend that the lower the amount of education, the more gun violence. This may be incorrect. At number 6, we have Arkansas. Arkansas is a state which is characterized by low income and less educated households. So this may be used to counter the Wyoming argument. Maybe there is a trend. It's hard to tell because each state has a differing education level and a different violence level that may or may not be correlated. And number 5 is Montana. So now we're going to go to the top 4 with Sai.
So first, at number 4, we have Alabama, and in Alabama, there are the worst education rates nationwide. And what that has produced is that Alabama also has a large number of other crimes, such as robbery and rape. And then at number 3, we have Mississippi. And Mississippi has the highest poverty rate in the country, with 24% of the population living in poverty. Interestingly enough, it also has the highest rate of unintentional death by firearms. Going on, we have Louisiana. It is the only state where firearm deaths related to suicide account for less than half of all gun deaths. It also is noted for having the third highest poverty rate. This really shows any correlation between poverty and firearm deaths.
And at number one may come to a surprise because most of the states we've talked about are generally on the East Coast. Number one is Alaska. There are 20 firearm deaths per 100,000 people, which is actually double the national rate. Unlike most states, Alaskan residents are quite wealthy. The typical household actually makes over $72,000 a year. So it seems like Alaska sort of contradicts the statements made in the previous states. It has the highest violence crime rate in the country. 60% of homes in Alaska have a gun, which is the most in the nation. So it seems to make sense that the more households that have guns, the more gun violence there will be. But Alaska is also characterized by extremely lax gun prevention laws, including the concealed carry law. Not on the survey, but interesting enough that we have found in our research, Vermont can be seen as a state with particularly interesting gun violence policies. Vermont allows people as young as 16 to conceal carry a weapon. 16. To give you, sort of a brief example, some 16-year-old who can't go see an R-rated movie alone or join the military can carry a gun. It seems like the states with the most lax rules seem to have the most attributed gun violence. And this sort of ties in right into our next topic discussion, which I think a lot of people will have stuff to talk about. And this is the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And so some people are very highly supportive of the Second Amendment. They feel that we're safer, and some people feel like the Second Amendment doesn't apply to today. So I want to ask Mr. Patterson, who is our sponsor here today, as an adult, you have a wife, you have a family, do you feel that the Second Amendment protects your rights as a citizen? It protects you from, dangers of crime, etc.?
Sure, I think the Second Amendment is a really important aspect of what it means to be an American, because it's a way that we can maintain some control and defend our rights, whether that be the right to defend our family or the right to organize as people when we want to change things in our own government. So I look at the statistics that we're reading over here, and absolutely, I don't want one single person to ever be shot or be killed because of a gun. In today's society, I think that should never happen. We're advanced as people, and we want to learn to work together. But I am extremely hesitant to take away the Second Amendment rights, because that's what our forefathers fought for.
And so, Bhargav, do you have anything else to add about why the Second Amendment is actually good for the nation as a whole?
I think the Second Amendment is actually good for the nation as a whole because it allows people to defend themselves instead of letting other people go about their own way. And so if people didn't have their own guns, then they wouldn't be able to protect themselves from a crime or intruder. And I'm neutral about this. I think there should be limits on the amount of guns people can carry and the way they acquire it. But ultimately, taking away guns will cause more harm than good because it'll cause the illegal acquisition of guns to go up, and it could prompt further violence.
So I'm going to add to that comment there. In my life, I've studied and really try to pattern my life after nonviolent people like Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi. I want to have that lifestyle. I would love to see society advance to where we don't need guns. But I look at the data that we've collected here, and I watch the news, and I see things that make me hesitate to trust that the information we're getting is accurate, and especially when we see so many news focused on the extreme emotions that go into gun violence. And I try to put it in perspective, because what we see is focusing on gun violence, which is horrible. We should never ever see that. I agree. But put it in perspective and think about, in Texas alone, over the last year, 3,500 people were killed in traffic accidents. So that's just one state, 3,500 people. That's way more people that were killed because of cars than because of guns. Multiply that times 50 for 50 states. That's a lot of people dying in traffic accidents. And yeah, it's horrible. And yes, it's an accident. But shouldn't we be focusing on making our cars safer or having better educational programs for cars? Why don't we highlight how many people are dying in auto accidents? Why are we highlighting that a minimum amount of people are killed with guns? And that is a path that I'd like to pursue further and talk about that, but it concerns me why we're focusing on straight up gun violence.
That's really true. It seems whenever you turn on the news today, you don't really hear that much about car accidents, traffic accidents. Sure, you may hear it on the Dallas Morning News to warn you not to go on a specific highway, but in terms of general public image of the auto industry, how many car accidents occur per year, it doesn't really show up as much in the media as gun violence. Whenever there's a school shooting, whenever there's some, incident in a poor residential area, that shows up all over the news, and it's over the news for the next couple of days. So it seems like maybe the media focuses more on gun violence than other, things that cause a lot more deaths. But of course you have to address the other side. There are a lot of people who say that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to us today. It was founded by the Founding Fathers in a time where they were trying to defend against the British, but that may not really apply today. And studies have found that people carrying guns for self-defense are 4 times more likely to be shot during an assault than a victim without a gun. And some people argue that you have to be trained to use guns before being allowed to own them. A lot of people own guns that may not even know how to use them. The concealed carry law, which is obviously on the news a lot, increases the likelihood that someone can just pull out a gun and start shooting. Nihar, do you want to add to why the Second Amendment may be, inhibiting our safety?
So I think having guns makes it harder for the police to distinguish between normal and responsible citizens and, say, those who have trouble regulating their firearm use. So for example, if someone is being robbed and both the robber and the person that owns the home has a gun, the police may have difficulty differentiating between who is the innocent citizen and who the thief is. This may lead to unnecessary injury. And also, guns held by law-abiding citizens may be set off accidentally by children or when people are intoxicated, and this may also lead to injury.
Thanks, Nihar. Our final topic that we want to discuss today is, of course, we need to address what's going on in the news all the time, is the school shootings. So, Bhargav, do you want to talk about that?
So, 2 or more weeks ago, on October 1st of 2015, at Umka Community College in Oregon, a student shot 8 students and an assistant professor and injured 9 others. This was the most deadliest shooting in modern Oregon history, and the gunman used 5 handguns, 1 long gun, and was in possession of a flak jacket and heavy ammunition. The police found that he had 8 other guns at his apartment. It's worth noting that all of the guns were legally obtained by either himself or family members. This had a huge place in the news cycle because sensational media always wants to find a blame for why this is happening, so gun laws have become the attention. And we're also in a rather unfortunate situation that this is in the middle of campaigning for the next president, so it's on their focus as well.
So again, I don't want one person to be shot, ever. I don't ever want to approach a family member of someone who's been injured by gun violence and be contradictory to what the peaceful nature of this country needs to be. But again, we need to be really careful because the proof is in the pudding. And when you examine some of the footage of some of these shootings, you're going to take a step back and see some things that people don't take the time to see because they're so emotionally charged with what they're seeing. But like, examine the Virginia broadcaster shootings, and there's lots of discrepancies about what you're seeing there. If you look at the footage, you see the guy from a first-person shooter shoot his weapon. It is a semi-automatic weapon, which should have the discharge of a shell after it's fired. It does not have that, which means it is a blank gun. You see the reporter in one angle shaking her head, acknowledging that she's going through the interview. In another angle, you don't see her shaking her head before she gets shot, meaning there was 2 takes, meaning it was staged. But there's more than that. The gunman's hand, you can tell, is clearly light-skinned. They told us that the gunman was clearly dark-skinned. You start to think of these things as, well, you know what, Mr. Patterson, that's just a controversy. But slow down, take a look at what's really going on. And so when we start to question the data on gun violence, let's really look at the motivations for why these things are happening. Do I want one person to be shot? No, I don't. Would I give up my guns if I trusted everything that we're being told? Yeah, I think I would, because I believe in our society. But we got to be really, really careful.
So when we're talking about school shootings, we tend to focus on the means to the murder instead of the actual motives or the reasoning behind the shootings. So an example of this is the Columbine High School massacre, which occurred on April 20th in 1999. And so what occurred was two students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, planned a suicidal shooting of students and staff at a high school in Columbine, Colorado. These students had a heavy use of bombs, so they set a firebomb to distract the firefighters from the situation. They set 99 explosives. They rigged bombs in vehicles, and they set propane tank bombs in the cafeteria. The firearms that they were using were obtained by both shooters legally, so they obtained 2 firearms and 2 shotguns, as well as by a friend, who obtained 1 rifle and 2 shotguns. The result was 12 students and 1 teacher were killed, 21 people were injured, and both students committed suicide at the same time.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast today. I know we've talked a lot about school shootings and the Second Amendment, but our focus on this podcast is to try to educate the public on issues that we see are prevalent to geography. Something like gun violence can be taken as just, it's occurring because there's more guns, the Second Amendment argument, but in reality, it can relate to geography as well, which is why we discussed the states and how it's correlated between low income or low educated states and gun violence. And so that's what we're here to do in Geopod. We're here to discuss things that are occurring in our world, try to relate them to geography, try to show why they're important, and show how we can find solutions to the problem and apply them to our lives today. So I just want to thank you for listening to our podcast, and see you next week.